Welcome to Believe in Progress, the American Association for Cancer Research Foundation podcast. Join us and be inspired by the incredible stories of those who have faced cancer with strength and resilience, and the medical professionals who are working tirelessly to find new treatments and ultimately a cure. Believe in Progress isn't just about the science of cancer. It's about the human side of this disease. Together, we can make progress in the fight against cancer and bring hope to those who need it most. Welcome back to another special episode of the Believe in Progress podcast, where we continue to honor survivors during National Cancer Survivor Month. I'm your host, Mitch Stoller, Chief Philanthropic Officer at AACR. In this second installment of our Best of Survivor Stories series, we bring you more incredible accounts of hope, resilience, and determination from cancer survivors. These stories remind us of the importance of ongoing research and support for cancer survivorship. In today's episode, we will hear from survivors who've not only conquered their diagnosis, but also turned their experiences into powerful advocacy and support for others. Their journeys highlight the progress made in cancer treatment and the vital role of research in improving the quality of life for survivors. Join us as we celebrate these inspiring individuals and their contributions to the fight against cancer. I'm kind of curious, looking at mental health during a cancer battle. First of all, checking in with you that you're feeling great now is fantastic. But what's the best advice that you would have for anyone struggling through their own battle for maintaining their mental health? Because I think, attitude plays a pretty big role in trying to help you battle through cancer, right?
It really does. And I had a great support system, which a lot of people don't have, but I really did. Everybody rallied around me, my friends and my family. But I think the minute you're diagnosed, the second you're diagnosed, you have to say, I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor now. And you have to believe that you're going to get better. You have to believe that you can tackle this mountain and that you can tackle this monster and you're going to come out on the other side. And I think it's easier when you're early stage. It's harder when you're metastatic, but I think you just have to believe and have faith that you're going to make it. And it's almost like jumping off a cliff with God and say, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to jump off that cliff. And I really had to relinquish my faith. And I always sort of had this spiritual gift of faith, but it was never tested before. And I just had to believe that I was going to be okay. And I've really just handed over. Okay, God, you've got me. I got to do this. I got to put this kid through school, so we got to work it out.
Right.
And I just let it go.
And Ricki, I loved in the bio where, you said you're a survivor, but /thriver. And I want to tell you that we, in the past, I'm on almost my 10th year here at AACR. We had a campaign a few years ago where we talked about thrivers. And tell me a little bit about that saying thriver and why do you say that?
I'm going to live my best life every day. Whatever it is, I'm going to live every day like it's my last day. And I think that's what we all have to do is like wake up in the morning and say, okay, what can I tackle today? What can I do? And take on the world and never be constrained by what you can do. And, having cancer and being told you're going to die makes you fearless.
Yeah.
I literally go paddleboarding in the dark in the morning. There's no other boats on the water. I think some of my neighbors are watching because they take pictures of me in the morning with my dog on my paddleboard, but I really don't care. I have no fear. My only fear in my life is my daughters or my kids getting cancer.
Right.
That's my only fear. And me getting it back, obviously, but you become fearless because you've conquered something that is really hard. And you just have to take it on and not let it rain on your parade.
What kind of marketing did you used to do and you do now?
So I did, and marketing now is advocacy,
Yeah,
but
yes.
I work for some big corporations. I've pretty much worked in every category. I worked for Nabisco. I worked for Coke. My last real big marketing job, I've done marketing for Jack Daniels, for insecticides, for every category.
Wow.
So I really do think like a brand manager, like what's in the mindset of the consumer and what behavior do you want them to change? And how do you give them the right messaging based on insights to get them to change that behavior? And that's what I'm doing right now with advocacy. I'm just taking those disciplines and applied them to how to help cancer patients think differently and act differently, and how to make people who don't have cancer know their risks and act differently because of them.
So let's chat a bit about these racial disparities, and can you talk to us a little bit about your work in this area? And I guess I'm so really impressed with you being a co-founder of Touch. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that and let the audience hear about that, because it's an impressive group, and I know you're just kind of getting it going and really going to make it happen. And just sitting here talking to you for a few minutes, I know it's going to be a huge success.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And I started Touch because of the numbers for Black women, and I said we're not paying enough attention to the science that we need, and the drugs aren't working. And I really wanted to focus on Black breast cancer. So I started saying those words, Black breast cancer.
Yes.
And I started saying them to pharma at like SABCS conference,
yes.
and saying, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, let's look at that. It's different. We're different. And now we have this growing body of research that's validating that a Black breast cancer cell looks different from a white one, that there may be some genes that we're uncovering in West Africa that aren't on the genetic panel that we test for in the States, that the genomics could be different. And so I just started challenging pharma and challenging the system, saying, we need to be looking at this differently. And one of my favorite quotes is Albert Einstein, a problem cannot be solved within which the framework it was created. And I said, you guys, we have to turn this upside down, flip it over, because the science isn't working. And so we set out on this mission to advance the science, and that's what we've been doing. And because I am a marketing person, everything I do is insight based. I talk to patients, I talk to the consumer, I talk to, the parties involved, and said, okay, what's in your head now? What do we need to change about it? Whether it's a patient or a doctor or a pharma company or a researcher. Like, you have to, question the status quo and figure out, basically admit that your baby's ugly. And I do that every day. I did it already today twice with 2 pharma companies and say, your baby's ugly, but I'm going to help you because you're not seeing it the way patients are seeing it. You're not listening to the patient voice. And they want to say that. They want to say they're listening, but they really just don't know how to do the words. And I think we've cracked the nut on that. And so we went on this mission to get more Black women into clinical trials. And so we took all the research that we did and put it in a pot, stirred it up, and then crafted over every word, every language. And we learned that the breasty voice is the only voice of trust. We don't trust doctors. We don't trust researchers. We don't trust pharma, but we trust another breastie who's had what we had. And so I learned that it was really important to explain the science from my voice, from a breasty voice. So we built our platform based on videos. So you could go on this video and find women who look like you, who sound like you, who share experiences with you, and you get it, and you understand the science. And it was really fear of the unknown.
Is this on the Touch website?
On the Touch, so on our When We Trial, whenwetrial.org website, which is connected, but whenwetrial.org, but it's fear of the unknown. They think you're going to get the sugar pill and die. And the mistrust is there, but it's more about just not understanding what standard of care is. What, that Advil you took last week was in a clinical trial. That medicine you gave your dog was in a clinical trial. And when you break it down from the voice of a breastie, they get it and they want to sign up. And so we launched this campaign a year ago. We did a lot of social media because we knew where to find breasties, because I wanted to make sure they had accurate information because our network is so small. And then we did a radio campaign, and then we hit the road. And between May and December, we did 25 events across the country that were not health events. We went to hair shows, beauty shows. We went to churches, but not for the health fair. We walked the beach at Martha's Vineyard when all the bougie Black people were there in pink bikinis. We went to the Essence Fest and walked around New Orleans in pink tutus. And we did what I call iconic things to be different. And we've now signed up 8,000 Black women for clinical trial portals.
In my parking garage where I live, on my way to my car, I see it's the doctor who did my biopsy. And of course, I want to answer the call. And she says, Donna, I'm so sorry. You have triple negative breast cancer. It is in the bile duct, and it is in the duct, the breast duct, and it is moving out of the duct. I just slid down to the floor of the garage and tried to process in that moment what she was telling me. There were like 2 Donnas going on in one body. One Donna was saying, this is serious. The other Donna was saying, get a grip, listen, try to pay attention so you can ask questions. And I let her talk. And once she finished talking, I told her I really didn't have any questions right then. What are the next steps? And we talked about next steps. And I immediately called a girlfriend and my husband. And they handled it so very well, because you need someone in that moment who's going to help you find your inner strength, because you're afraid.
Right.
You hear so much about this dreaded disease. You know it affects so many women. You hope, but you never really think it's going to be you, that you will be one of those women. And so that began my journey to get rid of the cancer. And it's as much a mental, spiritual, emotional journey as it is physical. I know there are people who think about the physical part and the treatment being hard, but I'm here to tell you the hardest and the smartest thing to do is to get not in control, but get aligned with your best self, your strongest self, the emotions that are going on in that time. Don't deny them. Don't run away from them. I took maybe a couple of weeks off right after the diagnosis, meaning not off from work, but going away. And I spent a lot of quiet time just meditating because I had to get ahead of my fear. I had to get more faith in me than I had fear, because the fear doesn't go away, but you have to find a way to strengthen your faith in everything, whatever you believe in. And I started meditating in a way that I never probably would have, but for the diagnosis. So there's always the good things that come out of it. I'm on the other side of it now, and happy to answer any questions about it for you, Mitch.
Interesting. Did your work ethic and the leadership skills that you have developed over the years, and you've mentored lots of people, did that help you with this in this cancer journey, and still help you today? Actually,
it did in several ways. One, as a leader, I've never been one to back away from a challenge, and maybe that's not smart. Not knowing when it's time to say no, and knowing when your strength can be a weakness. But this was one I couldn't back away. I had to step into. And so I fell back on that. And also it taught me to kind of reverse what I would do with my mentoring on myself, meaning, okay, Donna, if you were advising a friend, what would you do here? And I would go find friends to give me advice, because sometimes as a leader, we're so busy leading, we forget sometimes we need people to pour into us. And that's what I started doing, allowing people to pour into me, but not negatively, not with fear, but from a place of strength.
Was that hard for you to do? Allowing people to help? Yeah.
It really was. Sometimes you're so busy doing and giving, you forget you have to receive. And you also have to ask people for what you think you want, whatever that might be. And you have to find a way to help people work through their grief and fear for you. Because sometimes people will immediately assume this is what you need, because they're operating out of their own place of fear or concern or not knowing. And so I've always been one to try to read other people and be thoughtful and kind of meet them where they are. And I had to do more of that, but I also had to help them meet me. For instance, one of the things I tried hard to do, and I succeeded, and when you have success with something, it doesn't mean you don't slip up every now, but you get back to your success rhythm, or whatever that strength rhythm is. And one of the things I did not do is say, my cancer. The cancer did not belong to me. It was in the wrong place. And I would talk myself through this, because it helped me to center my body and my strength to understand these were cells that should have died and did not. They morphed into something they were not supposed to. They were just doing what they do, and they got it wrong. And so whenever I would go through chemo, right before chemo and during chemo, because chemo kills, the fast growing cells,
Yes.
I would have a conversation with my body about what was going on. And I would apologize to the cancer cells because I'm sorry, you're in the wrong place. You're going to die, and we're all going to let you go. And then I would apologize to my healthy cells and thank them for replenishing themselves and doing what they do in a normal, healthy way, and apologize to them, but thank them for being with me on this journey of replenishing my body with the right kind of cells. And to some, that sounds just outlandish, but I really believe in the mind, body, spirit connection. And you've got to help yourself, and you've got to be clear about this magnificent marvel that we have as a body and what it can do to heal itself if you bring in the right spiritual feeding and nurturing and healing. I journaled a lot, maybe not every day, but I would journal. And I go back and read those journals today because it reminds me of this inner strength that I have and the love. Oh my gosh, the love you find for yourself and for people around you, because you don't know what's going to happen, but you know the goal you have and that you're working toward.
Well, let me ask you, when you were dealing with when you were in the chemo phase and had to come home, probably running was out of the picture, like things that you were used to doing. That must have affected you psychologically, I would imagine.
Big time. So just for the audience, I wasn't just like a recreational runner. I was running 70 miles a week. 60 to 70 miles a week. And, I was running marathons 2 or 3 times a year. And I was linked up with a bunch of running groups. And I was in Runner's World a couple times. And so it wasn't, I wasn't like a hobby jogger. This was a part of my identity. So the fact that I couldn't really run a step for about 8 months was kind of devastating. I did try to run once or twice, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the stamina. I didn't have the strength. I didn't have the lungs for it. Once I was done with radiation, I slowly came back to running. That was very humbling for me. And as was cancer itself. And I just had to be patient. I just had to be patient with myself.
I'm assuming you're back to running and training again?
Yeah, thank God. I'm going to run the Philly Marathon with the AACR.
I heard. Thank you very much.
As you know. I feel, all things considered, I feel good. I think the things that bug me now are not cancer related. I think it's related to the fact that I may, in fact, be getting older.
That does have an effect on us.
This is what happens.
You've run, I think you've run over 17 marathons, right?
I've run 21 marathons, yeah.
21. Do you think your conditioning and your fitness, though, help you get through this?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think my body was in good shape. And I think my head was in pretty good shape going into it, both because of the running and because of my work. I have perspective. I think I'm level-headed. I think I would like to believe that I come with a level of self-awareness. And I think all of that really helped me. And I think the fact that I was coming in relatively healthy did help me with the treatments. And which is not to say that they weren't devastating and kind of horrific in their own way, but I do think that, I had a lot working for me.
Right. So you mentioned that in your role, in your profession as a rabbi, you provide support all the time for people. And now the tables were turned a little bit. Was that hard for you to accept?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with that. I'm so accustomed to this life that I live. I've been a rabbi for almost 20 years. I've had the great fortune of doing this work. And just to be a caregiver and to be there for people at various stages of their lives is something I'm just so accustomed to. I say the greatest thing about being a rabbi is the access you have to people. That I'm with people sometimes on the single greatest day of their lives, but also I have access to people on the absolute worst days of their lives. And no other profession lives at sort of both ends of that spectrum. So to suddenly be the one who was being kind of waited on and helped and kind of helpless was not something I was used to doing, and took some time to sort of adjust to. And even, for my family, we're used to each of us sort of inhabiting a role. And that's part of who I am. That's part of who I am, not only with congregants, but with my family, with my loved ones, trying to be present, trying to be helpful and empathetic. And, to not be able to do that for quite some time was, it strips you of your sort of being, and you start to wonder kind of, who am I right now? Who am I supposed to be? It's all very unnerving and unsettling.
Has the cancer changed the way you deal with your congregants? Does it? So I'm sure you're dealing with families that are faced with cancer diagnosis or currently living with cancer. Has that changed the way you go about it, and how?
Yeah, I'm with people. An hour ago, as we sit here, an hour ago, I was with someone who's dying, who is actively dying. And I'm with people who are at the end of their lives often, and I think a lot about how cancer did change me. I do think it made me a better rabbi. I think it made me more sensitive to what it means to be a patient and rely on others, and sort of even the dynamic of being in a hospital bed and having people sort of seated above you or standing above you. It feels like there's a level of hierarchy there. It's this, you're placed sort of in this very sort of humbling state. I think as a rabbi, I'm now much more attuned to that than ever before. I think I was attuned to it on a certain level before, but I'm much more attuned to that, and what it means to be really present for people who are struggling. I think I have a better grasp of that now. I also think I'm at peace with knowing it's not about what you say. A lot of people could write a whole essay on sort of what people said while I was sick, what people said to me. And it's really not about what you say to someone who's sick. It's about being present for them. Just being present, a non-anxious presence, as we say, someone who's just there and ready to help, ready to listen, not offering platitudes or cliches.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you discovered you had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, B cell?
Sure. I had a routine medical checkup, and my physician felt a mass in my abdomen.
Were you feeling sick?
No, I felt perfectly okay.
Okay.
No symptoms, nothing. A little bit of fullness. I felt a little fullness in my abdomen, but I didn't. I tried to attribute that to digestion. And he felt a mass, and then he said, well, this is not right. So I had a biopsy, and the biopsy turned out to be non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, follicular cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And I remember that diagnosis well. At the time, there was an experimental treatment,
Right.
That was Rituxan.
That's right.
Could you tell us a little bit about the experience with the doctor talking to you about what options you have?
Well, when you're told that you have cancer, it's devastating news, right? Because you're facing your mortality. And so when he told me that, I had been doing research in New York. I had sort of finished my research in West Africa and had really sort of distanced myself from I apprenticed to a well-known healer in Niger for a 17-year period. But he passed away, and I sort of was turning the page.
This is Adamu.
Yeah, Adamu Jenitongo, my teacher. And so when I got this news, I hadn't really been thought. I never really gave my health very much thought. I just do my exercises, eat well, didn't feel hardly ever got sick. And then, so when my physician told me that I had cancer, I was, shocked. And then all of a sudden, I got this tingling in my stomach, and I knew how I was going to have to confront it. And the way that I knew that I had to apply what I had learned from my teacher to my experience of having cancer. So he came back. Well, the first thing we did is, and you were there, we held hands, and I recited the Genji Hao, which is an incantation that harmonizes the forces in the world, basically. So it harmonizes the forces in that room. And if you have a sort of diagnosis of cancer, there's a lot of disharmony, imbalance. So that text was to sort of create a sense of balance. And I told my physician that, if there's kind of imbalance, healing is an impossibility. So I said, this creates a measure of balance. So he said, and he was okay with that. So that was cool. And then he went out to calculate what I was going to get, what kind of poisons they were going to drip into my bloodstream. He came back, and we went back to the infusion room, and there he said, I want to introduce you to your oncology nurse. And she was one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen in my life. I mean, honest to God. And she said, hi, Paul, I'm Kelly. I'm going to take very, very good care of you. So I turned to my physician and I said, you see, the magic is beginning to work already.
Do you remember that phrase, what the incantation you spoke?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Could you repeat that?
Well, it's Bismillah kas sanawe nuhuniga san dendi kundi kalakagwane debo jini kakun say fanda samana fanda say nyandu say seni say seni kakano jini tongo say jini tongo I say welcome gimi rago I mean bongera bone mini unkuno and debi. So that's
and what does that mean?
That means I speak to the seven heavens, I speak to the seven hells, I speak to the east, I speak to the west, I speak to the north, I speak to the south. My words must go up and up and up to the high spirit. May the high spirit hear them. And if the high spirit hears them, then there will be harmony and healing will take place.
And you deeply believed that, obviously, because we all held hands and it was something you believed. But if you take us back 25 or 30 years to, you said you were an apprentice, right,
Yeah.
with Adamu. Talk about that. Talk a little bit about that.
25 years ago, when I was an apprentice, my teacher had me memorize incantations. He sent me out to the bush, the nature, to look for healing plants, et cetera, et cetera. And I just basically watched him. When you have a master-apprentice kind of relationship, you just sort of sit with your master, you watch what he does, you listen to what he says, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, I didn't really realize what he had to teach me until, he presented all these. He sort of planted seeds of my into my mind, but they hadn't germinated yet. And so what I thought sorcery was all about, or healing was all about, was combating evil, basically. And when I became sick, I realized that that's not what it's about. When you confront your own mortality, it brought into relief what his basic message to me was. And that took me 25 years to realize. And that basic message was that it's very difficult to feel comfortable in your skin. And so all of the stuff that he was teaching me is, how do you feel comfortable in your skin? How do you maintain a kind of well-being in the world? How do you achieve that? And it's not easy, but that's the fundamental lesson. And so the experience I had sort of transformed me as a person, but also as a scholar. So prior to that, I was interested in research and theory and applying for grants and getting this and that. After I faced my own mortality and went through the process of chemotherapy and immunotherapy, et cetera, I thought the most important thing for me is to be a mentor and to tell stories, basically, and use narrative. So I changed my writing style. My writing became very different, and I tried to mentor as many younger scholars as possible.
You became a little more of a storyteller, right?
Yeah.
And prior to that, it was more research focused,
It was
more academic.
There was narrative in my writing, but there was not, it was not as front and center as it became after my having had cancer.
Melissa, we'll start with you. I'd love to hear a little bit about your cancer journey, and tell us a little bit about how you got to triple negative breast cancer.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having us here. And I'm just so I have the chills just being here with Haley. It's always surreal when you're telling your story. I'm almost 11 years out. I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer about 11 years ago, and I was a fashion and beauty publicist. I was a young mom living my life, and prior to that, my mom actually kept pressing me to get tested for the BRCA gene because we have a lot of breast cancer in our family. And I did test positive for the BRCA gene. I was very closely monitored, but still, I was diagnosed with triple negative, and it was shocking because not only did I know I'd never heard of triple negative breast cancer, but I didn't even know that there were different types of breast cancer. So this news sent me to a tailspin, and Mitch, I was just very, very lucky that because I was closely monitored. We caught this thing at stage 1 with no node involvement, which is really lucky. And once I knew what my course of treatment was, which was bilateral mastectomy and aggressive chemotherapy, which is what this disease usually requires, I thought, how am I going to look pretty for my meetings? I don't need to look like a supermodel. I just want to look like myself. So I went online, Googled it. Where's the vogue of breast cancer? Where are the cool wigs and the pretty post-mastectomy bras? And I was so frustrated because nothing was in one place. So I started a list, and this list became a blog. And when I realized that there were other women just like me that really desperately needed these resources, I thought, I got to keep doing this. So it became a passion project of mine. And I met Haley Dirman, who happens to be the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation Executive Director, who happens to be basically my next door neighbor, and our daughters went to high school together.
You did not know her prior to that?
No. And so the story goes, we met, and she was like, hey, do you want to be, featured on our, you want to be one of our champions? I'm like, what's that? She was like, we'll share your story on our website. I'm like, why would I want anyone to know I have breast cancer? Right. No way, Jose. And now I'm like, where's the camera?
Welcome to the podcast.
So I launched I owe so much to Haley. She's a dear friend, but also a mentor, and has always encouraged me to keep going and to keep sharing what I know in different mediums, which included a podcast, which I launched during COVID, something that I always wanted to do and I love. And I'm just, and I'm now also the board chair for the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation, which is, again, very surreal. But it's an incredible honor to be working alongside Haley and our incredible board to keep our mission going.
Cancer patients in Nigeria, we have no one to talk to. Our fears, we swallow it up, we cover it up. We believe that nobody will understand us, and actually nobody does understand. So I felt that there was that need for cancer patients to have a forum whereby we can be free, share our experiences, talk about our diseases, talk about our fears, our aspirations, and everything. So, I continue doing my little bit. Anytime I go to the hospital, to the clinic, I kept on talking to few patients like myself, giving us hope. From a year, I was given, after my treatment started in August of 2010, and I concluded with the radiotherapy in May 2011. Then I was now given some periodic checkup, 3 months. From 3 months, I was given 6 months. Later, I was now on annual checkup. So, and each time I come, I from a year, I went to 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and the nurses were so impressed. So sometimes when I come, they will tell me, Gloria, why not talk to fellow patients like yourself, give them hope, and that was how I started talking. I wasn't afraid sharing my story with them and telling them that there is hope. It's not a death sentence.
Cancer can often be seen through a lens of stigma and misinformation. I'm hearing a little bit about what motivated you to speak out, but why is there, in your opinion, the stigma and misinformation in your country?
In my country, there's this belief that if something bad happens to you, you're at fault. There's this erroneous belief. So it's assumed that if you have cancer, in fact, some of our preachers, they preach it, they will tell you, if you don't donate money to church, if you don't do this in the church, you will be sick, you will have cancer. So such things, and we are predominantly religious group. Islam and Muslim, the same thing, you're told if you don't do this, this will happen to you. So a lot of persons believe that if you have cancer, it's probably because you're not living a good life. It's probably because you're not doing all that you're supposed to do. And that's why cancer came. And I wanted to disabuse that mind. Some tells me, oh, it's because why did you accept it? You shouldn't have accepted it. Some tells me, I remembered on one occasion I went to the clinic. We met a guy came, sat among us, and we thought that he was also a patient. And the next thing, as we were discussing our ailments, normally, the next thing he told us was that that it is sin that made us to have cancer, and that we should go and do total immersion, baptism, and when we do it, our sins will be cleansed, and after it is cleansed, we will be cured.
Wow.
Because it is sin that brings disease. That kind of explanation. And it struck me that none of us could challenge him. It was like we had already accepted our faith. And after some minutes, I spoke up and I told him, we are not the worst sinners. Babies also have cancer. So what have they done? They didn't do anything wrong. So we are not the worst sinners. And by the way, we're already having cancer. Don't make it worse for us. And
right.
When I said it, other cancer patients were like, yes, it's true. Why would he say such thing? So I felt bad because in as much as we have cancer, we also have that stigma. And it is that stigma that makes a lot of cancer patients not to open up. We kind of hide it because of what people will say. We hide it because we feel that, maybe there are some things we did or we are doing that we're not supposed to do. That's why the cancer came. And that's what they tell us. And by the time we hide it, many cancer patients don't even go to the hospital. And that's why when you hear about the mortality rate in Africa, it's because we present at stages 3 and 4. So it's at the late stages we present, and it's because of the stigma. We keep on hiding it, going to church to pray, asking God to just take it away. When we're doing all those things, the cancer is growing. And when we can't endure the stench or whatever anymore, that's when family will now bring us to the hospital.
And Gloria, is this what inspired you to create and develop Knee Pickin'?
Exactly.
So talk a little bit about that, because it sounds like there was no support groups in Nigeria or even in the country to help cancer patients. Like here in the United States, there's lots of organizations and lots of support groups. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Knee Pickin' and what the purpose is and some of the challenges and what good things you're doing to help people.
Okay, first of all, I'll need to talk about the fact that even though I wanted the opportunity for cancer patients to have a forum where we can come together, I didn't have the means to do that. And it was Mr. Runcie. There's an NGO project, Pink Blue. Mr. Runcie approached me. He actually knows another cancer patient that I met at the hospital. And the lady, Madam Khadijat, we lost her 2 weeks ago. God rest her soul. She knew me, and she knew how I speak to fellow cancer patients when we come for clinic. So when Mr. Runcie met her and told her that he needed a cancer patient that can be going with him for outreaches to tell people that cancer is not a death sentence and encouraging them to come for screening so that it can be caught early, Madam Khadijat referred, in fact, she brought him to my office. And we sat down and we talked. He told me what he wanted me to do. Initially, that wasn't really my idea. I wanted to talk to cancer patients, not to go for outreaches and talk to people that didn't have cancer. But on the long run, I felt that the people that stigmatizes against cancer patients are the ones that don't have cancer. So if I'm also talking to them, it's also a way of helping out. So I joined him in the outreach. That was in 2015. Then in 2017, during the World Cancer Day, he decided that we are going to form a cancer patient support group. So he wanted us, the cancer patients, to have a forum. And since I have been working with him, I became the leader of the cancer patient support group.
My first chemo treatment, I threw a chemo comedy party in New York City.
Okay.
And from that minute forward, I don't think cancer was ever the same.
Didn't stand a chance against you, right?
No.
So how did you come up with that idea? I mean, were you already like in show business or comedy prior to this?
Yeah, I had produced over many different projects, but I had worked on over 40 productions with Dick Clark, another Philadelphia.
Yeah, I remember that guy.
And
American Bandstand, right?
Yes. And so I really knew that world, and I was in charge of scouting new comics. So I had a deep, footprint in the comedy world. I really understood comedy and who was funny and had a sensibility that was a bit cleaner because I had to find comics for television.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I decided that I loved comedy. It had been part of my whole story since I was a little girl, and that I needed to surround myself with comedy. But it was inspired by Norman Cousins.
Yes.
Norman Cousins had written the book Anatomy of an Illness and then a second book. And he talked about his battle with a life-threatening disease and how when he laughed, the impact that had on his body, mind, and spirit. And that was then studied. But when I was at USC as a college student, they had an excerpt of Norman Cousins' book in a magazine that I read on campus. I can remember it plain as day, and it deeply imprinted on me. Mm-hmm. So the night that I was diagnosed, it was a Friday night, and they said, "I'm sorry, the cancer team has gone home for the night. Could you come back on Monday?" And immediately I thought, Norman Cousins, I have to get every stand-up comedy tape that I can find. That's how long ago it was, because I was misdiagnosed 31 years ago and then started treatment 25 years ago. So we had videotapes.
So for 6 years you were dealing with cancer, and they didn't know it.
Nope. And they were attributing different things that were happening to me for different causes, but they missed the whole cancer diagnosis. And what's so interesting is that I am so passionate about early detection.
Yes.
Because I was so early, and partly because my grandmother had died in her 40s.
Breast cancer?
Yes, and from complications from breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And so I was so vigilant and then, ignored. And I'm not a shy person, as you know.
I know that.
That's how come I went to so many doctors. But eventually you go on with your life. And so when this happened, I knew I had to play catch up. I also had been, I'm a single mom at the time, and I was going through this really brutal divorce. And so my daughter had been through so much. The idea of levity and joy and play as a staple in my cancer journey seemed like a good parenting strategy also.
How old was she at this time?
5 turning 6.
Okay, so pretty young.
Yeah, so I went to the video store from the hospital, got every stand-up comedy tape that Blockbuster and West Coast Video would loan me. I went to 2, that's how hardcore this was. And I came home and I got her to bed as fast as I could. And then I collapsed on the ground crying because this was huge. Yeah. How was I going to juggle this divorce and sole custody and also this cancer story that had been delayed? It was so much.
Yeah.
And so I saw the stack of comedy tapes and I was like, I have to put in Eddie Murphy. I have to put in Richard Pryor. I have to put in this list. And I started laughing. And what I realized was when they say you have cancer, and I've heard so many people on your podcast who've had cancer say you have cancer. I didn't hear it like that, Mitch. I heard it like the devil from The Exorcist.
Right.
It was, you have cancer. And I was so
scared. Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, I got to get that voice out of my head. So I started watching the comedy and I didn't laugh. I cried. I sobbed. But I said, you know what? It worked for Norman Cousins. Maybe it's going to work for me. And so I literally forced myself to hear the setup, hear the punchline, and laugh. And then it turned into tears, like complete sobbing with like it was like a bit manic and psychotic. But what I realized was that this guy was right. His body of research that he had ignited was correct. When I laughed, I didn't feel like I was going to die. And when I laughed, life felt normal. It didn't feel like the tsunami of cancer.
Right.
So I stayed up all night listening to this comedy marathon. And when my daughter awakened, I said to her, you're going to be my humor buddy. And she goes, is that like a playmate? It's like, yes. And then I go, and we're going to make an appointment to laugh. And she goes, is that like a play date? And I said, yes, yes, that's exactly it. And then I thought, how dumb am I? Like, she got this. This is just what I forgot, like going through a divorce and not feeling well and all the things that adults go through to become chronically serious as we get older. And then you throw a cancer diagnosis on that, and it's crazy.
Right.
So that was the start of it, not a charity, just how we could use it as a family strategy.
How did that go over though in that first, session with people? I could imagine there were other people getting their chemo and things. I wonder what their reactions were. Just like my reaction when you made me laugh for 15 seconds, which was positive.
Okay, first of all, this was a true sarin party. I brought in sparkling cider and party favors and little sandwiches and dessert. I mean, I threw a party in the chemo facility.
All right.
Right? And then I went person to person and I said, I'm going to have a chemo comedy party. Would you like to join our comedy event? And some people were so desperate for entertainment and to be distracted. Some people were so scared they wanted the distraction. Some people were nauseated, so they wanted the distraction. And then there were a few naysayers who just crossed their arm and they're like, what's so funny about cancer?
Angry people, right? Yeah.
And so I said, I have this weird comic perspective. I can share it with you. And then I intentionally told them the worst joke I could think of. And then they went, that's a terrible joke. I could tell you a better joke, but I hooked them. That was it. Yep. And then everybody kind of gathered around. And then slowly but surely, the nurses, the phlebotomists, the techs, the people that were coming in to sell drugs from the pharma companies, the oncologists, they all kind of gathered around. It was like a magnet or moth to flame. And I looked around the room and I went, whoa, I just changed cancer. Like the sight, the taste, the touch, the vibe, the feeling, the energy. Like this chemo comedy party did something. But I didn't think of a charity. It was really when the nurse said, it was a Paula Poundstone joke about an airline. And the nurse said, don't tell the punchline. I have to give a push. And I was like, wait, the push? That's adriamycin. That's the scary one. That's the one that's going to singe my hair off. And wait, our comedy is like as important as that. So that's when I realized we had really done something that day. And then she came back and it was time for my push, gave me the push. And then I felt it. Like I felt it course through me. I felt it come up through my like nose into my head. Felt the whole thing. It was powerful. And then I put my head back and then I sat up and I just said, I know why I'm here. And everybody was like, yes, dear, we know why you're here. And I was like, no, like why I'm really here. And they said, why? And I said, because I have to bring chemo comedy parties to everyone. I have to show people that we can infuse humor and joy and laughter, and we can build a community right here in the chemo room because we're all going through this. We don't have to be in isolation, in fear, in drama. We can have this strategy. And that was it. That was the minute that I knew that my life was going to be devoted.
Thank you for joining us for this second installment of our Best of Survivor Stories series on the Believe in Progress podcast. The courage and determination of the survivors we heard from today are truly inspiring and highlight the importance of ongoing support and research. If you were moved by these incredible stories, we encourage you to visit aacr.org and make a donation. Your support is essential in advancing cancer research and improving outcomes for survivors. Please subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes and continue to hear more inspiring stories and important discussions. Share this episode with your community to raise awareness and celebrate the strength of cancer survivors. Thank you for being part of our mission. Let's continue to make progress together. And until next time, remember, cancer research saves lives.